Hey everybody, Ernest Morrow here. Welcome to Empowering Intimacy. Super stoked to get started on this 5-module adventure with everybody here. And I'm really grateful for you jumping in here with me. This is my passion. This is what I get up every day and talk about and explore, kind of what I live for. So this is exciting for me. And I'm really confident it's going to be a real needle mover for you guys here too. So we're going to start module 1, the real of love. This is what we're talking about today, and hopefully really getting into and embodying. And we're starting here because the real of love is something we have to orient to. We've got to get a map before we go any further. And so let me just do a little bit of housekeeping. If you've got questions about the technical side of this course, anything from how to get on the website to get the replays or anything like that, you can throw it in the Facebook group. And if you haven't already, please join the Facebook group if you're on Facebook. I understand not everybody is, but if you are, that's where links and a lot of Q&A is going to take place. So if you want to get to me quick, the Facebook group is the easiest way, or you can email me, also pretty quick, ernest@ernestmorrow.com, and we will sort whatever needs to be sorted for you. Cool. So today, we're going to run for about 75 minutes of content, and then we're going to use the rest of our time for questions and answers. We won't go over 2 hours. That's my commitment. We all have busy lives, and anything more than that, we tend to get diminishing returns. But if we have extra time at the end, because we just can't get enough of this stuff, there's the Facebook group as well. And for those of you inside of Empowering Intimacy, there's also going to be the group discovery container, which is the bonus that you all receive for signing up here. And that's 60 days inside of the group discovery calls. And that's an awesome opportunity to really workshop this in a deep way and get live coaching, feedback, and really get into your context and how to apply it. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. Those calls are Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Those start the first week of January. So we're not going to try to get those going because everybody's in holiday mode for the next few weeks. But for those of you on this live version of these calls, we are going to be running today, next Thursday, the 19th, the following Thursday, which is the 26th, which is Boxing Day. I get that. We're going to take the 2nd of January off, and then our last 2 sessions will be the 9th and 16th of January. So next week, next week's the 19th and the 26th. I think I said that right. I did. Okay. And then today, how this webinar format works is you can probably see the little Q&A button. And there are already people chiming in, which is what I'm hoping for, that you guys can actually type away as you listen. And so that you're actually we're getting like feedback and questions in real time. So think about it like almost as if you're putting up your hand in school. If you type your stuff into the Q&A box, I'm going to get that and I'll be able to respond in real time. The Facebook group name for the person who asked is called Empowering Intimacy. It's linked to in the details, course details email that you hopefully got. And if you're here, you probably got that email, so it should be in there as well. And Yeah, so I'm hoping we can have a bit of an ongoing dialogue as we go, not just waiting for all the questions to come at the very end, because sometimes it's really apropos, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and answer those questions as they come in. So please feel free to chime in on the Q&A as we go. And as I said, that's a little box on your screen, and we're going to type instead of use the audio because background noise and all sorts of things get kind of wonky sometimes when we're doing the audio thing. And I say this every time. I'm going to say it every time. If you can, see if you can minimize distractions. I know it's hard. We've all got our phones blowing up, and probably, sometimes we're just fitting this in and multitasking, but the amount of information we absorb when we're really singularly focused versus the amount of information that we absorb when we have our attention scattered is, clinically proven to be orders of magnitude different. And so we're talking about something really important. And for me, we want this to go deeper than just insight, deeper than just like, oh, that sounds like a good idea, and really kind of see if we can get this to land inside of us. Because when we're talking about empowering intimacy, we're talking about an embodied reality, right? And to be empowered is to be able to move into the world in a particular way. And we need our bodies for that. And then how we receive teaching and a transmission, which this is going to be over the next 5 weeks, matters. And so if we're distracted and kind of half listening, then I hope you can kind of go back and use the recording and really take time to sink into it, because some of this stuff is going to be new, really new, for most of us, and it takes a little bit of time to really just drop in. And even familiar language that you might think exactly what it means might have a slightly different spin on it. So if you can, really think about this as an act of devotion, going to the temple, going to the church, for your own experience of intimacy in your life, whatever that looks like for you. And we have people from all different kinds of situations. There are people on this course who are in long-term relationships and have been for years, people who are single and are upping their relationship game so that the dating and relating process is going to be informed by empowering intimacy. And we have got people, who are in relatively new relationships. So, and people in relationships that are struggling, even. So, if you're out there wondering if you belong, you do. You absolutely belong. And your questions, your inquiries, your engagement is going to be a blessing to tons of people. And really want to invite you and encourage you to bring that particular context that you're coming from into this space and allow it to bless us all. And that's really how we synergize here. And so much of what's going to come through isn't just what I've already decided to speak, but actually what comes through when those questions are asked, and then the answers or the experiments or the wondering is elicited from the very inquiry that you've got. So if something is hitting you and it's hitting you and you think you're the only person, I guarantee you, you're not alone. It's probably hit me in the past. So I know that for sure. Okay. So let me jump into this. This Reel of Love, the module that we're going to really begin our empowering intimacy journey on today. And so the Reel of Love is an important place to start, because unless we understand what love is for and why it doesn't work any other way than what it's for, we're going to be at a disadvantage. We are going to be working through some real tough stuff. And the next piece is how do we crack the hidden code of our beloved, right? So we're going to talk about how those inner masculine and feminine energies impact our relationship, and about mastering polarity. Now we're also going to be talking about the difference in relating from the nervous system, which is our default, versus the heart, which is what actually works. So those are the big buckets that we're going to be inside of today. And I actually think, just let me rewind. There's the fundamentals of polarity. How to keep attraction alive over the long term. So let me sum this up again. We're going to start with the truth about love and intimacy, what it's for, why it doesn't work any other way, through the fundamentals of polarity and how to keep attraction alive, right? Because that's what makes a relationship work over the long term. Next, we're going to dive into that cracking the hidden code of your beloved. And we're talking about those inner masculine and feminine energies. And then we're going to finish today before our Q&A time with the difference between relating from the nervous system and the heart. So let's start with the truth about love. We need a map. The truth about love is like a map. And, you know, my favorite analogy for this is, if we've got the right map for the city we're in, we're going to be able to navigate. But if we don't, if we're in San Francisco, but we're using the map of New York City, we're going to keep on looking for the Empire State Building and it's not going to be there, right? We're going to keep on looking for Greenwich Village and end up in the Tenderloin. Like it's a difficult thing to do. And anything that we happen to like stumble across in terms of resemblance is random at best. So I want you to start this inquiry right now. And if any of you want to share this, feel free. But the first thing to do is ask yourself, in your experience, what is love for? So don't let me tell you right away what I think, but in your deep considered experience. And I want you to, you know, you can have your stories and narratives, that can be part of your experience, but in terms of your experience of relating and relationship and love, what is love for? What would you say about that in your own life? And I'd love to hear from any of you folks who want to chime in on the Facebook group exploring this. What your experience has told you about what love is for. Here's what we're going to be working with from the empowering intimacy angle. This is what, in my experience and having worked with hundreds and hundreds of people and couples over the years, this is what love is for. Love is for freedom. Love is here, and love between self and other is here to show me where I am not free, so that I can actually move towards freedom in my life. So love is bringing me the opportunity for greater freedom. Love is also for truth. Right? Love is inviting me into a deeper relationship with the truth of who I am, the truth of who the other is, and through that, creating a different experience of truth in my own life and the life of the world. And similarly to freedom, but a little bit different, love is for liberation. And what I mean from that is the liberation from our bonds, which is our history, right? That which we've experienced, the insults and arrows, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare calls them, these things that have left dents and bruises and cuts and slices and slashes inside of us. And maybe we've experienced those in our own life, or maybe we've inherited these from our parents or the generations on back, or they come karmically in from some other mysterious realm of life. But wherever they come from, they're here right now. And how do we liberate ourselves into greater ease, and spaciousness inside of our present moment. And so that sense of liberation is included in love. So notice here what we didn't have on this list. And I love this. Somebody's just chimed in. Love is for connection, revealing, healing, joy, freedom, truth, and co-creation. Love helps us remember who we are beyond the stories and the wounds we've bought into or inherited. Couldn't have said it better myself. In fact, I don't think I said it better. That sounds great. Absolutely. Notice what's not on this list. We didn't say happiness. We didn't say, ecstasy. We didn't say this kind of, we didn't use an emotional goal post for what love is. And that's on purpose, because love isn't about primarily our emotional experience of it. And why we're getting dialed in on this is because the story we tell ourselves about love matters. And without a new story, part of what I'm calling empowering intimacy, we've actually been programmed with a story already. None of us grow into adulthood without a story of what love is. And most of that story is manufactured through media and entertainment and our own family experience, or extended family, including our friends' experience of what love is. So we observe, and we are bombarded with advertisement, right? Everything's selling something, right? Movies are selling themselves to us. Television shows are selling themselves to us. Advertisements are obviously selling themselves to us. And that programs a story about love. And the story that we're programmed into is that love is primarily an emotional reality. It's working or isn't working depending on how we're feeling in the moment. And that story is not true. And that matters, because if we're navigating through San Francisco using our map of New York City, we're gonna get frustrated, right? And we're gonna, if we really believe in the map, we're gonna feel like the city's broken, right? Where did they put the Empire State Building, right? It's right here on the map. It should be right here. What's the matter? And we get this disjointedness with our experience, because our what we're navigating towards inwardly, and our outer experience doesn't match up, and there's a lot of dissonance there. And that's actually a pretty scary experience. Having the right map for the right place is a sense of safety and security. When we don't know where we are, we're totally disoriented. And so back into this question, what's your default story about love? Like, what were you programmed into? Think about that for a second. What did you leave your adolescence believing about love? If you've left your 20s, what did you leave your 20s? To take this by decade. What was your story about love then? What about your 40s or 30s and your 40s and your 50s and your 60s, right? How has your default story about love progressed? What is it for? Right? What have you been navigating towards? And that's a really revealing exploration about that default story about love. Because if it's not true, if it's not actually a story about freedom or liberation or healing of some kind, we're going to be constantly running into dead ends. We're going to be constantly running into those places where we just don't think it's working. And it might actually not be the problem with love. It might be a problem with our story. And so getting empowered around this and telling a powerful story about love is important. So my question to you guys here is, what do you imagine would change about your experience in relationship if you truly believed love was here to wake you up? And I want to just pause here, because in my own life, Um, I've been paying lip service to this for quite a while. Right? I've been paying lip service to love waking me up for, I don't know, 15 years at least in my life. But there's a real gap between paying lip service to something and really letting it in. If love was here to wake me up, to show me otherwise, in other words, where I'm asleep right now. What if love is here to wake me up, to show me where I'm asleep? Now, it doesn't mean that love is also changes from being love. Of course it's love, and love is its own reward, right? Being in love is a wonderful experience in and of itself. So we're not saying that it changes the quality of love into something it's not, into challenge or heartbreak or anything like that. It remains love, but love is here as an ally, as its own motive force to truly wake us up where we're asleep, right? Where we haven't fully realized the truth about some part of our life, or we're stuck in some part of our own history. So this is where we're going to start with seeing if we can update the files here and really feel into, can I embrace the possibility? Right? If love is not here to make your problems go away, but actually to show you where you're still not free. Right? And what would it be like for those of you who are single right now to enter your next relationship with that as your map? Right? This beloved, this other, this person who you're going to step into contact with isn't here to make your problems go away, but actually to show you where you still aren't free, which is a far greater service, right? And for those of you inside of a relationship right now, what would it be like to walk into tomorrow like that? Right? What if this love that you're already in the middle of, this relationship that you're already in the middle of, is not actually here to make your problems go away? Right? So the question isn't what's the problem and how do I fix it? The question becomes, but what is this showing me about where I'm not already free? And inside of that inquiry, I hope you can feel it, we get this empowerment happening, right? Something, now love isn't now this thing that's happening to me, but I'm actually gaining a sense of, wait a second, I think I know part of how this thing works here. I think I know, what kind of gas to put in. Oh, it's this kind of thing. Instead of being totally shocked and surprised when we keep on turning a corner and the map is not lining up with where we think we are. And I speak from years of painful experience here. Right? When at the end of my first relationship, which was 6 years long, I was devastated. I was like, what is love for if it's not for making me happy for my whole life? Right? I was just floored. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is not the story. This is not the programming. The programming, I thought, was like we were gonna, have fun and have sex. And the more fun and sex we were having together was the point. Many people who enter into relationships in their 20s start there. Not everybody, and I know there are a few of you on the course who aren't there, who are of that age. But it's out there, right? And we have to do some serious sitting with the other question, because the question that's being asked by default in our programming, without us even thinking about it, is, why isn't this making me happy? Why aren't more of my problems going away? So empowerment in empowering intimacy comes from this truth about love, and otherwise we're using the wrong map. So before we move on, just take a breath with that, and maybe it seems kind of heady, but I want to invite you to not let it be heady. See if you can really take that in and see if you can find a place for it to live in your somatic experience, your embodiment. Right? Where could that reality of love live inside of you? And what do you have to do in terms of process to let go of that, perhaps an old story? Right? Love is here to make me happy, to solve my problems, rather than to show me where I'm not already free, to liberate me from the traumas and false self stories of the past. How can you really breathe that in? And because of this, one of those embodied practices is when we know where that lives in our body, in times of, when we're getting frustrated that the map we've got isn't lining up with the experience we're having, we can drop into that place in our body and remind ourselves, wait a second, I got another map. And this is what it feels like. So as part of the practices, I'm going to invite you to carve out 5-10 minutes sometime in the next day or two and see if you can really find out how to inhabit love as a path of freedom. That's what it's for. It's not secondarily for that. It's for that. That's the purpose. That's what love has showed up in your life precisely to facilitate. Cool. And we can chat about that more in the Facebook group or on the group calls. So we're going to move on to the next piece about the real of love. And this is a real big deal for me, the fundamentals of polarity. So I want to define polarity for a second. In my definition, polarity is the force of magnetic attraction between two complementary poles. So, you got the plus and the minus end of a magnet, and they're attracted to each other, right? And without that magnetic attraction, the bond of relationship is weak. So magnetic attraction, for those of you who aren't science geeks like me, is the building block even of the atoms, right? Like there are negative particles and positive particles, and the atoms hold together based on this attraction of complementary forces. And then groups of atoms hold together because they stick together because of this magnetic force. And then those molecules stick together to other molecules based on this complementary force. So like the building blocks of everything that we know to be matter, everything that's a something rather than a nothing, actually holds together. The fundamental relationship of all life, creation, the universe, is this force of magnetic attraction between two poles. And that's a powerful law, you can say reality probably, layer of reality that we can harness inside of our intimate relationships. And without that strong polarity, right, the weaker the polarity, the weaker the bond, and the weaker the relationship, right? So the easier it is to split these things apart. And the breakdown of polarity of that attractive magnetic force, I'm not just talking sexually, I'm talking sexually, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, right? All these levels on which we have those polarities is a huge reason why relationships end, right? And so you can think about your last relationship and why it ended. All of us probably have a last relationship. And think about what was it that finally broke that bond inside of that love that brought you together in the beginning. So we're going to go into the stages of a love relationship here. And there are predictable stages to every love relationship that does not work. So I want to break this down because if you're in relationship, You can use this as a very, very important metric for not going down this road. And if you're not in a relationship, this is a pretty amazing thing to know on this side of things, so that you don't have to follow this road at all in your next relationship that's going to arise as you date and relate from this empowered place. So here are these stages. The first stage is what I call the heart opening stage. So in pop culture, this is called the honeymoon stage, right? And we all heard of the honeymoon stage. We've all been in the honeymoon stage probably, right? And it's like we're full of love, our heart's open, and most people experience themselves and life as a lot more friendly during this stage, right? We're kinder, we're more generous, everything's got a twinkle, the birds are singing, right? And we've got a bounce in our step, and our heart has opened. We've been open to love. So that's the initial stage of relationship. The second stage is when our hearts begin to close down after all that opening. So in our pop culture, right, the honeymoon is over, we say, right? Well, the infatuation period has ended, right? And so we've got this kind of codified story about how relationships function. Already we're starting to see it. So we have this honeymoon phase, and then the honeymoon is over, and the heart begins to close, and you know, we move on. And then we get into the real relationship, right? That's basically struggle, right? In which we're like, you know, it's a power struggle in a lot of ways, right? Are we going your way? Are we going my way? Right? Why are you acting like that? Why are you acting like that? This isn't what I signed up for. Well, let's do some work around this, or right? And we're in the real relationship part of it. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, but it's marked because in that heart opening stage, there wasn't a lot of struggle. And as that heart begins to close, that's what paves the way for this period in which struggle is a real possibility. And then with every relationship that doesn't make it, whatever we consider making it, whatever success looks like for us in a relationship, the options are walking out or numbing out, right? So either we walk out a relationship and it splits apart, we diverge our paths, we break up, right? Which is an evocative form. If you think about that magnetic bond, we break apart the molecular structure that is our relationship. Or we numb out, which is like, I'm going to stay here, but I'm just going to like medicate myself, right? I'm going to ignore this. And we probably all know people in those relationships. They're just kind of going through the motions and mailing it in. They've kind of dissociated themselves from the struggle, and they find themselves just kind of like waking up and doing it because it's a habit, but not because it's a tremendously empowered and juicy, life-giving, intimate thing. And we call this stage in our pop culture falling out of love, right? So my language, heart opens, heart closes, we struggle, and we walk out or we numb out. Pop culture, there's the honeymoon, honeymoon's over, real relationship starts, and then we just fall out of love. You know, we could love each other, we're just not in love. Has anybody ever told that to you? I've been there, right? I love you, I'm just not in love with you anymore. Somehow I've fallen into love and then fallen out of love. So in empowering intimacy, we are categorically 100% not accepting that this is the only way for love to go. What we just talked through, that kind of story of love, is not the only way for love to go. No way. We're going to come up with a new story, and it's a more accurate story. So the question that's guiding empowering intimacy is, how do we stay in open-hearted love? Remember that first stage, the honeymoon stage? Open-hearted. How do we stay in open-hearted love, right? And not have our heart shut down and then struggle and then walk out or numb out. How do we actually stay in open-hearted love? That's the story I'm interested in. I think it's the story y'all are interested in. I think it's the story every human's interested in, except we have this amazingly powerful, psychologically informed narrative at this point about how it's impossible, right? It's a honeymoon stage, and the honeymoon's going to be over soon. So, enjoy it while it lasts. My question I ask is, well, what if that love, that open-heartedness is actually the most real stage of relationship? That's the most real part of the relationship, because that's when our hearts are open and we're kinder, we're more generous, right? We feel more like ourselves, we're more accepting, we're more forgiving. Like all these wonderful qualities of being human emerge when we're in that initial stage of a relationship. So I'm not personally ready to give that up. And in fact, I don't think we have to. I know we don't have to. I've seen it. I've lived it. What if our collective story about that honeymoon stage not being real love is simply because we have no idea how to steward it, right? Steward, to take care of, to cultivate, to curate, to tend to, right? What if we just have assumed that it's impermanent and unsustainable simply because we don't actually know how to stay there? And I think that that is, in fact, the truth. If we look into places in spiritual world history or world traditions, we actually see that love is not codified in the same way, right? There's not this story about how we fall into love and then out of love. That love actually seems to be represented as a place where we can live, that we can stay. And that's what we're talking about in terms of empowering intimacy. So ask yourself, is that what you want? Would you do that if you could do that? If you could stay in open-hearted love, and forget calling it the honeymoon phase, because I don't believe it is just a honeymoon. It's just open-hearted love. Would you sign up for that? Would you say yes to that? I would. And this is what brings us back to polarity, because polarity is actually the key to staying in open-hearted love, right? How we navigate polarity, how we master polarity is the key to how we stay in open-hearted love. So let me say a few things about intimacy here. And just a reminder, as I take a sip of water, that if you've got any questions as we go, type them in. I'll get to them as we go, and you don't have to wait till Q&A time. So most intimacy teaching revolves around thinking about polarity as the masculine and the feminine, or the yin and the yang. It's opposites. It's light and dark. It's heaven and earth. It's these kind of primordial opposites. But in terms of relating, it's the masculine and feminine that gets the most airtime. Love it. Love the masculine and feminine. So the idea here that if one partner embodies the yang polarity, that's the kind of masculine essence, and the other the yin polarity, regardless of body or gender, that attraction happens, sex happens, and sparkle happens, right? And not only will those happen, but they'll be sustainable. So this is like other people's conscious intimacy training that you could go take. And for whatever it's worth, okay, there's an absolute utility and degree of truth here. We're going to talk about this. But here's the deal, folks, and this is what I want to offer you uniquely from inside of Empowering Intimacy. The masculine and feminine polarity is important in my experience, but it is not actually the place that our deepest empowerment comes from when we're thinking about polarity. So it's not the deepest, most fundamental bond of attraction that we think that actually connects us in love. I don't want you to, stop watching at this point, because what you were here to learn about is the masculine and feminine. We're going to get there. So let me reassure you, I do believe that embodiment of sacred masculine and divine feminine energies in relationship is a totally powerful teaching. We're going to touch on it. We're going to do more than touch on it. We're going to dive in, but it cannot be first. And this is what I want to jump up and down and say. It can't be first. And here's why. What is first? The most essential polarity for every human being and every relationship is between self and other. I'm going to say that again. The most essential polarity for every human being and human relationship is self and other. It's not masculine and feminine. Masculine and feminine are derivative of self and other. So if we really want to get into the root, if we really want to get to the deepest place and begin to have empowered skillfulness around the polarity, the bond that keeps me in love in that open-hearted stage, I need to be aware that that's a polarity that is defined by self and other. That's the complementary opposite that is operating down there. And if that primary polarity collapses, that polarity between self and other, then the relationship and the love will stagnate. That intimacy is going to stall. And we may end up, especially if we're not aware of this, working on some other level of polarity, trying to fix it or make it work and get it all straightened out. But it's really this fundamental polarity between self and other. So in empowering intimacy, I want to talk about this quite a bit, because this is a real needle mover. And if we don't get this, if we stay above this and we're just working on masculine and feminine, I've seen lots of people who are masters of masculine and feminine polarity in a way, not be able to sustain intimacy and that open-hearted love over time. Why? Because it's not actually the deepest level. And if that deepest level falls apart, especially if it's invisible and we don't know what was going on, intimacy doesn't have a chance. So I've said this already, but masculine and feminine is derivative. So our capacity to embody the masculine and feminine actually requires the self and other polarity to be stable. So here's the deal. I want to explain this. Intimacy flows between two selves, right? There's a me and a you. The beauty about you is that you're an other me. Like, see if I can make this not sound like just a riddle. I'm me, I'm a subject, I say I. And you are not just an object of my experience, but you are also a subject. You are an I, and I am an I. We're both me's. And for me, you're you. And for you, I'm the you. Right? So we have this kind of self and other, but the other is an other self. We're subjects together. Not understanding this creates a massive, massive crisis in our intimacy. Right? Not really getting that self and other is the primary way that we relate to anybody, but especially our beloved, right? I'm me and I'm not you, and you're not me. But we are both subjects of our own life, of our own experience. And here's the problem. The issue is that your otherness, the fact that you're not me, actually is what brings me towards you. Right? We can think about love as that attractive force to be able to share life, to share contact with another being who's not me, right? And that attraction is like, wow, this feels like a really life-giving experience to share contact, to really connect heart to heart, human to human with this other being who's not me, right? The fundamental thing is I can't be in relationship just with self and self, right? Myself and self. right? There's no two-ness there. There's no relational flow. What we're talking about in terms of human intimacy is there's two people at least, me, other. So I'm attracted to that otherness, but, and it really freaks me out. Because here's the deal. We've got this deep, eros, sexualized, sensualized attraction to other, right? Because the complementary opposite is what creates more life biologically. Male and female get together, right? Sexual union. But I've got this fear of belonging, and the way that the belonging side of our brain works, which is like, I am most safe around people who look like me or feel like me or resemble me, right? The more that people are like me, the less I have to worry about being exiled or left or abandoned. The more I fit into my family, right, the more affection I'm going to get. The more I do what mom and dad want me to do, the safer I feel, the more approval, the more love, right? And so we've got this very strong conditioning influence that to be like somebody else and to not be like others represents a significant threat. So we've got these competing forces, and that's our puzzle, that's our tangle. So inside of that fundamental polarity between self and other, which if it breaks down, we've got real problems, like big problems in our intimacy. There's this tension because I'm so pulled in by the fact that you're not like me, because you're not me, you're another being, discrete entity. So that really draws me in, but whoa, it freaks me out because your otherness is actually something that might end up in you abandoning or rejecting me. I might be left, or I might be told that I'm wrong or not good enough. And we've all had those traumas in our lives. So intimacy and closeness happens between self and other. It is the fact that you are not me that makes this whole thing exciting and attractive. But on the other hand, if I'm not really able to hold myself deeply, if I'm really not able to validate who I am and my particularity, my distinction, my idiosyncrasy, then your otherness becomes a huge threat because I need you to be more like me, or I need to become more like you so that I can feel safe enough to be in this amount of closeness, which is vulnerable. Now, especially when we're opening up our bodies, we're opening up our sexuality, we're opening up our financial reality, we're opening up all the things we do when we're in close relationship, right? That otherness begins to be a potential threat, right? I don't mind if my next door neighbor is different than me, but if you're sleeping in my bed every night and we have our name on the same bank account, your otherness becomes a serious liability because I am very, very vulnerable. And you might decide that you don't like me because I'm different than you. Tough. So this is how love turns to fear. And this is why the polarity between self and other is the foundation to stay in open-hearted love. Because what happens inside of that predictable downfall of relationship is that we play a game of self-betrayal and manipulation because we're trying desperately to pretend or to posture like we're more like the other than we actually are. Right? Of course I like skydiving. I don't really like skydiving, but I want you to think I do. Right? Or to subtly manipulate into the other into being more like us. Right? So I might give you a big kiss when you're watching a show that I want to watch, but I might come and check out what show you're watching and kind of go, and turn away when you're watching a show I don't want to watch. Right? It's like these subtle little hints at like, oh, you're different than me. Don't know about that. Right? And so these start small and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so this is what actually leads us down that rabbit hole, that funnel, that whirlpool of the relationship that doesn't work. This is how we leave open-hearted love. Love turns to fear. So our hearts begin to close. Then we begin to get to struggle. Who's right? Who's wrong? How are we going to deal with this? And eventually we're like, forget it. Now I'm not in love at all. And we numb out or walk out. So self and other are incredibly important polarities to attend to. So the take home here is that in order to have that open-hearted love last, here's the hack, guys. This is the truth. If you want the open-hearted love to last, that we have to be able to embrace the otherness of our partners. So if you're dating and relating, think about this, right? Of course you want to feel that attraction. Of course you want to feel that, this is an other. This is another person, right? That's the attraction. And that question is, how can I practice holding and embracing the otherness from the beginning? If you're in a relationship, really inquire here. What part of my partner's otherness have I subtly or not so subtly made wrong? What part of my own otherness have I hid or damped down? In order to make otherness embraceable, in order to really be okay with the other person being the other, which is what's going to create the most bond, the most magnetic, sustainable, open-hearted glue, the deeper I have to be okay with my own particularity, the deeper I have to be okay with the weird, quirky, kind of messed up, a little bit backwards human being that I am. Right? Because that's my safety. If I'm good with me, then you can be weird and unlike me, and I don't have to be nearly as threatened. And that love doesn't have to turn into fear. But man, if I'm not okay with me, and I really don't believe that I'm lovable as I am, and so I have to shimmy and shake and present my best peacock feather forward, then the chances that I'm going to be good with your otherness, slim to none. And guess why a relationship ends? Because eventually that bond of polarity weakens and weakens and weakens, and then something comes and dislodges it, and away it goes. So this is how we actually stay inside of open-hearted love. And the practice I want to offer you guys is to inquire, who am I? Right? Who is this one, this weird human being? And you're going to be weird because you're a human being. And some of the ways to get into this practice are asking yourself, what do I stand for? Right? What's true for me? What am I living for? What's the actual thing that I'm living for? And maybe even what's keeping me from living for that thing? Right? Let's be honest about some of the obstacles that we face, because that's also a way to hold ourselves. We don't have to be without obstacles, but we have to be honest about what we're up against. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is how I'm standing for it. And here's this place where I want to be standing for it, but I just can't because of those other things. Well, that's where I happen to be right now. That's the me. And then I can be okay with you being the same way. And this is who you're standing for. This is what you're doing to stand for it. And here's this other place where you can't stand for what you want because you're still working on through this other stuff. Got it. And then this question of how can you experiment with living more into your truth right now, today? Like, what's a baby step? And empowering intimacy is not meant to simply be a theory. It's meant to be a practice. How can you live this out? So my invitation to you is to take this experiment into your daily life. One thing every day. Right? What am I going to do today so that I'm living more in the truth? In other words, how can I be more me so that I can allow you to be more you? If you're not in a relationship right now, dial this in before or as you date and relate. If you're in relationship now, start today. Don't worry about tomorrow, start today. How can I be more me today so that I can allow you to be more you? And for those of you who are, in couples who are both watching this, amazing. This alone, me being more me, you being more you, if we're both doing that, wow, you'll watch and feel the bond increase in strength. A return, perhaps, of open-hearted love in a measurable way. So that's the importance of this practice. And this is empowering intimacy. So I'm excited to share it with you. So we're going to switch gears here to our third topic of the day, but let's just take a breath, because that was a big one. And if all you ever take away from this course is that will be enough to change your relationships. Right? The deeper I can be me, the deeper I can allow you to be you, and the more contact and energy is going to be inside of that bonding for whatever we want that relationship to do. And if it's a love relationship, what is it going to be for? It's going to be for freedom. It's going to be for liberation. It's going to be for truth. Yeah. All right. So now we get to talk about the juicy part, the polarity everybody was waiting for, the masculine and feminine. So the way I talk about the masculine and feminine, first of all, is the inner masculine and feminine, right? So we all are unions of masculine and feminine, right? The sperm and the egg got together and created us, right? And we have those polarities inside of us, no matter what kind of body we're in. And then it's holographic. It has different layers to it and levels, right? And so there's a level at which the sperm is actually also a combination of masculine and feminine. And the egg is a union of masculine and feminine. So it's a fractal, right? And then, male-bodied people and female-bodied people, and psychologically we can have essential qualities. So even though we're unions, we're also at the very same time inhabit a polarity. So we're both on one level a union, and another level a polarity, one pole of the polarity, right? Not the same level, right? I'm a union of masculine and feminine, and that union of masculine and feminine produces a polarized whole at another level. So I want to get that clear. And when I'm talking about masculine and feminine, I'm not saying male and female. And let's be clear about that. The inner masculine or the divine masculine is not a man, and the sacred feminine or the inner feminine is not a woman. Many people in male bodies have a masculine essence. Many people in female bodies have a feminine essence. That's not always the case. So we're not confusing this with biology, and biology is a rough, on a gross scale way, to generalize, but we're going to try to avoid generalization as much as possible. So let's define these polarities. The inner feminine. What's the inner feminine? So when I'm talking about the inner feminine, I'm talking about life force, right? That Shakti, that energy that creates, that is life arising, and its power, right? It's the tides of the ocean. It's the heat from the sun. It's the orbit of the stars. It's the movement of life, and in a very concentrated way, it's desire, right? It's that which moves me forward into life. And the inner feminine reaches its maturity in service of the masculine. The inner masculine. The inner masculine is the quality of presence, right? It's the Shiva. It's the that which stands, right? So the feminine is that which moves. The masculine is that which stands, which holds, right? It's presence, it's will, right? It's directive, and it's commitment, right? It stands for something. It doesn't just stand, it stands for. And the inner masculine reaches its maturity in service of the feminine, right? So these two polarities find their fullness in relationship to the other. Now, self and other. Here we are again. Maybe we're onto something, right? But both the inner feminine doesn't really find its fullness. It can exist in a sense out of relationship with the inner masculine, but its maturity is found in relationship to the inner masculine. And likewise, the inner masculine find its fullness, its maturity, its completion in service to the feminine. So they imply a relationship with one another, right? They're not just running their own programs for their own sake. They are actually deeply in service to the whole, to the other, which creates the whole. So one of my favorite analogies for this is the banks and the river, right? So the river is that feminine movement, the power, the life force, that desire moving towards the ocean. And the banks are that masculine presence, that commitment to the river, and that will that guides the river, that works with the river to take it to the ocean, right? So without the river, the banks are just a dry valley, canyon. And without the banks, the river is just a wetland. It's a marsh. It's just a stagnant body of water. But together, they move into the ocean, that greater space of life. So, in light of this self and other polarity, the fundamental polarity of all love, all magnetic relating, the most important relationship is the inner masculine to the inner feminine, and the inner feminine to the inner masculine, right? One to the other. That's what we're talking about. So in empowering intimacy, we're not focusing primarily on cultivating inner feminine all on its own and inner masculine all on its own. But what we're doing is we're learning to think about how these primordial energies inside of us relate to each other inside of me. So I want to talk about two initiations. In the journey of a human being into what I would call intimate maturity, right? The maturity that allows for intimacy. There are not one, but two initiations that have to happen. So our culture is actually just starting to recover a sense of the first initiation, right? So maybe you're in a men's group or you've heard of these things that happen, these people that go out and bang drums in the woods and do the male initiation thing. I do that quite frequently. And then we've also heard of women's circles, right? And the sacred mysteries of the deep feminine or those kinds of things. And so that first initiation, and we think about this in a kind of more indigenous, from our ancestors, our indigenous ancestors, that first initiation was as a boy or a girl, before maturity, before sexual maturity. And at sexual maturity, there's this initiatic process in which the boy becomes a man and the girl becomes a woman. And so women initiate other women and men initiate other men. And that's into that first stage of inner feminine or inner masculine, right? In a sense, into a contact with or an embodiment of, oh, wow, yeah, this is me, right? I can do this embodied inner feminine thing, or I can do this embodied inner masculine thing. So that's the first initiation. Now, the second initiation, once that first initiation happens, is into relationship with the other. Right? So as we're just going to use the archetype of boy and girl hitting puberty, sexually mature, they get initiated, one into the collective of the masculine, one into the collective of the feminine. Let's say these are women and men. The next question is, how do these polarities initiate themselves into relationship with the other? Because where many initiation progression stop is like, okay, well, we've got our collective of men, good. We've got our collective of women, good. We've got these kind of defined things. We're going to have some kind of, interaction between them, but we're not actually going to, really be fully initiated into this intimate contact with the other. We're going to have very formalized, genderized, taboo framed limits to these, propriety in these interactions. So we're very formalized, but we're not going to be fully initiated into this deep, intimate union. That's the second initiation that we're talking about. So what that is about how does my masculine serve the feminine? That's that second initiation. Not who am I on my own, but who am I in relationship? And if I'm asking a question of my inner feminine, it's not who am I on my own as the inner feminine, but who am I in relationship with the masculine? That's that second initiation into intimate contact, self and other, magnetic polarity. So the invitation from this perspective of empowering intimacy is, if you are a woman who loves men, then what would it mean to put your attention on how your inner masculine is in devotion to your inner feminine? Right? You might assume that it was going to be the other way around, but you've got both of these inside of you. How is your own inner masculine in devotion to your inner feminine? So here are some examples. Well, let me pause here and explain why we're doing that. That might not be clear. This is because it's the quality of your inner masculine that is going to attract the masculine outside of you. So if you want an outer masculine who's in devotion to your outer feminine, then your inner masculine must be in devotion to your inner feminine. Let me pause that. And feel free to ask questions as we go. Yeah, I just got a high five. That's true in somebody's experience out there. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the key, right? If I want to, as a woman with a feminine essence who wants a devoted experience of partnership with a man, whether I'm in relationship or still dating and relating, then that quality of devotion that I'm craving has to be actualized inside of myself. Otherwise, I'm going to find myself noticing and being attracted to men who represent a more immature inner masculine. So some of the ways that you can practice with this, if you're a woman who loves men, is that your inner masculine is devoted to your inner feminine by unswerving commitment and faithfulness to her, right? To what she wants for herself. He's got her back. And that's huge. What else does the inner masculine do? The inner masculine provides support and protection for that inner feminine, right? Now, this is not outer, this is inner. This is a question. So what would it look like for me to be unswervingly committed and faithful to my true desires, to my life force, to that sacred movement of the feminine in my life? What would it look like to protect myself and to support myself there? And what would it look like to create a world, a life, in which my inner feminine's desires can really actualize? right? These are all sacred masculine qualities: commitment, faithfulness, protection, support, creativity, right? But instead of looking for that outside, I'm beginning to actualize it inside of me as the primary alchemy. Yeah. So just a reflection, that my partner reflects what's happening with my inner masculine, and it's creating confusion for us both. Yeah. Well, that tends to be what's happening. Now, the more in integrity I am with my inner masculine, the more that the masculine outside of me I can hold to account. The more in integrity I am with my inner feminine, the more the feminine outside me, whether or not it's in a romantic relationship, I can hold to account. Right? But when I'm giving the outside responsibility for what I haven't yet done inside, chaos ensues. The bonds break. Self and other, right, ends in a sense. So the flip side of this is, if you're a man who loves women, then from empowering intimacy perspective, I'm going to invite you to put your attention on how your own inner feminine is in devotion to your inner masculine. Right? How can your own feminine side truly support your inner masculine? And here's some starting points. So the feminine seduces the masculine into delight and desire, right? That's part of the gift, the love light, the radiance of the feminine allows the masculine, in a sense, to cease from his labor, his relentless creativity, and enjoy. So there's also permission to be soft and fluid, and this is about more than just our body, although it includes our body, right? So permission to be soft and fluid and emotional, and creating a life. Now, this was how the inner feminine is in devotion to the inner masculine, creating a life where joy is as important as service, right? So using Frederick Buechner's quote, it's where life is calling me to be is where my great joy, feminine, meets the world's deep need, masculine, where joy and service intersect. But without that inner feminine, that life is meant to be savored, lived, and deeply experienced as rapturous, that masculine inside all of us can just be on task, whatever that task might be. So that's how the inner masculine is served by the inner feminine. So that first initiation that we talked about of the man into himself, or the masculine into itself, and the woman or the feminine into itself, that first initiation is not actually enough for union. It's not enough to create the kind of empowered intimacy that keeps us in open-hearted love, right? Because it's the beginning. It creates differentiation, but then it stops short of mutual surrender, right? It stops short there. The second initiation, however, without the first, just as a performance. And so, this is out there in the world. And so, there are people teaching feminine arts and masculine arts, and kind of like it's like, we're gonna pretend, we're gonna do the form, we're gonna do the performance of surrendering and devoting to each other. But unless I know I have enough integrity with myself, that devotion to the other is gonna create that fear eventually. That's gonna lead to resentment, right? It's gonna lead to a feeling of unsafety, and that's gonna pop us away from each other. So self, first initiation; other, second initiation. When self and other are together inside of me, and self and other are together inside of you, now we can actually have that deep bond that allows open-hearted love to stay and not devolve into that path of relational breakdown. So the inquiry practice from here is a question to you all, right? What initiation of the two that we named is calling to you, right? Is it the initiation into self, into your own deep native essence, right? To find out more, to deepen more into that quality of masculine or feminine that is your kind of the deepest expression of your union? Do you need to spend more time if you're a woman with other women? Or do you need to spend more time if you're a man with other men? Is that initiation that's calling you that you need to strengthen? Or are you called into that second initiation, right? In which case, how do I begin to think about myself as in service to the other, right? In blessing the other with my particular gifts. And where's that going to start? It's going to start inside of me. And just as we heard from one of the participants who notices this with her husband in relationship, it affects the field that you're in. So if you're in relationship, you can play with this as you go. It's going to change day by day by day. If you're dating and relating, you're going to notice this in your dating and relating, or just knowing this and practicing this within yourself and getting that. How do I, as when I have women clients who come to me with the expressed desire to be in relationship, every single time we have to attend to that maturing process of that woman's inner masculine so that it can truly show up in devotion and commitment, in protection and service to her inner feminine. Whereas many of the things that we're taught about polarity is if I'm a woman with a feminine essence and I keep on becoming more and more feminine, I'm going to just attract a more masculine person. It doesn't work that way, right? And same for men, right? It's too much cowbell in one way or another. We actually have to create that inner union. And this is a way to think about it, hopefully in a narrative that allows you to embody it in a new way. Can I give a couple of very practical examples of each of these? Let's see. Well, let's talk about it in terms of this next question, which is what experiments can I run to connect my inner polarities, right? So that's the question I want to leave you all with, and hopefully you're going to share some of these experiments and their data with us all on the group calls or the Facebook group. Let's take an example. So if my masculine is going to be in service of my inner feminine, right? I'm going to find out that inner feminine is pure desire, right? It's life force. So what do I really want is, let's say the example is, I really want to, express myself musically. That's like a deep need for me, right? It's a calling, it's a desire, it's an arising life force. I've got this, that's Shakti moving in me. My inner masculine is what puts me in the space and holds me in the space where that becomes possible. So the inner masculine is what shows up to my piano to practice. The inner masculine is what puts me in lessons or jams with my friends, right? And holds me there, is committed to it, right? And stays and protects that space, right? Sorry, my inner masculine is like, sorry, I can't hang out with you, and tonight's music night, right? Click, right? That's the inner masculine. That inner masculine is holding space and presence for that deep desire arising in me, right? And that's music. It could be actually sexually. It could be in terms of my vocation or my career. I'm doing this thing over here, but what I'm really called to is to work with panda bears in the wild. Well, you're going to need your inner masculine to really hold that vision and to keep holding it as the inevitable waves come and things try to crash into it and just derail you. That inner masculine is going to be the thing that's in service to that inner feminine. On the flip side, that inner feminine being in service to that inner masculine, that if that inner masculine is that part of us that just won't stop, right? It's planning, it's thinking, it's strategizing, it's problem solving. And that inner feminine is remembering to breathe, to move your body, right? To drink nourishing drinks, to eat nourishing food, to be surrounded by nourishing community, right? It's that which is reminding that drive in all of us that there's life to be lived and to be savored. It's slowing down, right, when we've sped up. So, and both of those, you can see how they exist in this beautiful Tao, this yin yang, that are constantly feeding into each other, right? As I stand for my desire blesses the standing, right? Like that which is solving this problem of how do I work with the panda bears, but then the desire itself is allowing that standing for to enjoy life, which sustains the standing for, which then empowers, and around we go. And if we start to get this inner orbit working inside of us, magic happens on the outside. So hopefully that helps. If there needs to be a follow-up, then we can take it up at the end. Okay, last subject. How are we doing for time? A little bit of talking, Ernest. Nervous system versus heart. So I want to introduce some terminology here. And this is something that we're going to see for the next 5 weeks. It's going to show up in almost everything I do. So I want to give it to you so that we can all get on board. What I call the nervous system is the false self. It's the personality. And what I mean by false self and personality, the nervous system, that collection of kind of like psychobiological stories and synapses and high level and low level. That false self is a collection of strategies we use to secure love and avoid abandonment. So we're looking to gain love and belonging, and we're looking to avoid abandonment and rejection. And it's the strategies, that collection of strategies that we've built up from childhood, or even maybe sometimes inherited through our family line. That's our nervous system, right? It's our personality trance. It's that collection of strategies. The heart, on the other hand, is the true self. So nervous system, heart, false self, true self. Why do I call the nervous system and heart? Because it puts it back in the body. It's not just an idea. Because where's the false self and where's the true self? Well, it turns out that these things actually have physiological corollaries, right? The nervous system really is kind of held in the mind and brain psychology apparatus, and the heart, our physical blood pumper here, really is the seat of the true self. Not the energetic heart, but that true self, that true heart, is who you are beneath that conditioning, those strategies of what you've all built up, what we've all built up to see if we can get more love and belonging in our life. So without those strategies, there's just this true self, this original innocence. So I'm going to contrast these two places. So on one hand, the nervous system processes our experience through the lens of problems, right? I need to solve a problem in order to be okay. So that's how the nervous system processes our experience. The heart processes our experience through the lens of no problem. I'm already okay, right? So the nervous system, what do I need to figure out so that I can be okay? The heart, through no problem, I'm already okay. And that's a big difference. From the nervous system, remember self and other, the other is simply an object of my okayness. And this is so key, right? You aren't another self from my nervous system. When I approach you from my nervous system, you're just a toy character in my dollhouse, in my drama, right? I'm I and you're it. And you either are helping me feel okay or not helping me feel okay. And I keep you close if you are, or want you close, and I try to get rid of you and distance myself if you're not, right? So you're just an object of my okayness. So you're not You're not another self. You're just like a piece of furniture in my life. But from the heart, the other is another self, another me. And to use Martin Buber's terminology, you become a thou to my I. You're not an it. You're not an object. You're a thou. You're another subject. You're a person who's worthy of reverence and respect and consideration. And that's only available from the heart. So why we're talking about this is that fundamental polarity of self and other is only truly available to be actualized when we're working from our hearts. From the nervous system relationship, as you can imagine, is transactional, right? What am I going to get out of this? Is the cost worth the benefit, right? I'll stay here only as long as the amount of times I'm winning outwins the amount of times I'm losing. So it's all this, it's a constant kind of cost benefit analysis. Whereas from the heart, relationship is an expression of the wholeness that I already am. It's not a transaction. I'm not making a deal with you, right? I do this and you do that. Relationship is an expression of the wholeness I am. I'm called to you, right? I'm called to be in service to you. Why? Because I love you, right? There's this love that's drawing me to you, right? And so I'm not asking, what are you going to do for me? I am actually motivated by this desire for contact of my wholeness with your wholeness. Very different way of moving into relationship. And the reality is, everybody, is that we have to find a way to move from our nervous system to our hearts in order to truly sustain long-term intimacy. Because you can see that the only way that fundamental self-other polarity is possible is from the heart, right? Self-other polarity from the nervous system is just me and an object. And I'm sure all of you have had the experience of being somebody else's object. Ouch. You probably have also had the experience of the other person being an object, right? And that's basically what we do. It's like when the other person is object, when they're doing what we want, we give them positive reinforcement. And when they're not doing what we want, we give them negative reinforcement. And we're into that manipulative power struggle that takes us down the whirlpool, and relationship breakdown becomes pretty much inevitable. So this movement from nervous system to heart is going to be implied in everything that we're doing, and especially inside of the group intensives and the one-on-one containers I create with people inside of this empowering intimacy work, because it's a powerful, powerful frame for that transition and that movement. So if you ever find yourselves on this journey and wanting more support, there are going to be opportunities to get that in very, very, very rich and robust ways as you journey. So the practice here to really start to work on this shift from nervous system to heart, first of all, is to identify what are the strategies that you use to try and secure love, right? Name them, right? Start to get intimate with the false self. Start to get intimate with the things you do because you want love, right? They're not coming from a place of real, genuine truth, and you've got to be willing to be honest here. But what am I doing to subtly try and get more of what I want in my life? And that's going to be a huge piece. And secondarily, which part of your personality are these strategies, right? And so these are things that we identify with. Like I'm just a really generous person, right? These are your virtues. I'm generous, I'm kind, I'm giving, I'm productive, I'm a caretaker, I provide well, I'm a provider. These things that we are conditioned to think are really good qualities. Maybe we put them in our dating profile. But they actually turn out to just be strategies that we learned from our nervous system in order to get love. Now, if that's what we're using, that's where we're living from primarily in order to be in relationships, self and other are going to break down eventually. And we've got relational breakdown in one form or another. And so what experiment can you run to see what happens without one of these strategies, right? So if you've identified bravely, I want to say bravely, this is a brave invitation, like, oh, there's definitely part of my generosity, which is a strategy for love. What's going to happen today if I don't do that, right? If I'm not generous from a place of strategy to get love, what happens? What does that feel like? What does that bring up for me? That's the first step. And the more you bring this into the Facebook group, the more you bring this into the group discovery calls, the more chance you're going to have to get underneath this. So I really invite you to share these experiments with us. So here's the summary, folks, where we've been today. We talked about the truth about love. We talked about the fundamentals of polarity. We talked about the inner masculine and feminine, and we've talked about the nervous system and the heart. So that's this module, first module complete of the real of love, right? And each of these layers has tremendous implications for the map we have, either to create new love in our life if we're dating and relating, or to give us a map whereby our current relationship can kind of head on a new road perhaps, rather than the road that we may be taking into more breakdown. And these are essential pieces, and there's so much to work with inside of each of these. And I really hope that you take this on in some way and start experimenting. And there is guidance. So if you're on this course, be part of the Facebook group. You'll find me on there. If you're on this course, you're part of the group discovery calls, then I'll see you on there, and let's really work this. So now let's take a moment, several moments, for Q&A. What about this would be more helpful to understand more about, or to get inside of? Or if you've got a question about your own context and you'd like to know how to apply it in your context, or whatever you like to share, this is an opportunity for anything at all to be shared with. So you can either throw it in the chat or use the Q&A box. And your inquiry enriches us all, because what we're here doing is we're a learning community, right? This is a community of practice. And as we practice together, we are enriched by each other, right? By each other's journey. Just simply sometimes knowing that somebody else is on a journey, like to know that somebody's really noticing that her husband responds to how she's holding her own inner masculine. That's good to know, right? Because now it's not just me saying that, there's another person saying that. And we begin to create this body of wisdom that way. Here's a question from Laura. How can you tell if generosity, for example, is a strategy and not genuine? Well, one way to notice is if I stop doing it, does any fear come up? Does any kind of like discomfort come up? Like if I'm not gonna do that today, right? So let's say, I don't know, I'm used to picking up my partner's dry cleaning on the way home from work on Fridays. And I'm like, you know what? I think I just want to take that time and go have a walk by the ocean. If I respond with emotional distress, guilt, shame, fear, sadness, that might be actually evidence that I've been doing that to make sure things keep happening. Not because it's necessarily the truth of me, but I could also experiment. And this is why this is all about experimentation, right? Because there's nobody, and believe me, if anybody is going to stand in front of you and tell you exactly what to do and not do in your life around love, like, run the other way. This is all about experimentation. And empowering intimacy is empowering all of us to take the science of our own relationship life and our intimacy into our own hands, and with these principles, figuring out how do these live inside of my own life. So we have to experiment. But one of the ways that we get into the experiment is noticing, right? Like any addiction, right? Somebody's like, I can totally stop drinking. It's like, great, stop this weekend. Let's see how you feel, right? If you're not addicted, then you don't drink and you're fine, right? You're like, oh, well, I'd like to drink, but I don't have to drink. But then if you find yourself really feeling like you aren't fully well, then that's part of your nervous system strategy. It's part of your identity. It's part of like, I'm not sure this is going to be okay if I don't do this. And we start to contract. That would be a general way. If there's a contraction? So we get to find this out. But there's probably no way to tell. I mean, some of us know, right? I'm like, oh, that's totally what I do. But some of the things are going to be more hidden. And the way that we tell for sure is by experimenting. So great question. That experimentation piece is going to be pure gold for everybody who's listening. Because it really, again, it's empowering, right? Who's going to tell me what's true about this for me? Oh, I'm going to tell me. I'm going to find out what happens if, right? So that's a great question. Anything else out there? This is obviously opportunity one. It's part of the beauty of doing this live. If you're on this live call, you can get some extra real-time coaching. Of course, starting in January, there will be more of that in the group discovery. And the Facebook group, as those questions percolate, is going to also be a place where you can get support around any of this stuff. So what else is out there? Type away into those little boxes. And sometimes we got to let these things percolate, or sometimes they just seem self-evident and questions only come up as we start to experiment. So I'm just going to hang here, guys, for another few minutes, but I promise you that I won't just leave tons of dead air. Can I say a little bit more about the first initiation? You mentioned indigenous cultures, but what happens nowadays with these? Yeah, so we, in a sense, we're being unintentionally initiated into cultural masculinity and femininity, right? And so whatever that might be, I mean, the kind of shudder is like, boys are initiated into manhood by professional sports and Maxim magazine. And, women are initiated into femininity by, pop culture, fashion, and Cosmo kind of thing. Now that's, those is obviously not entirely true, but on a broad scale, there's probably some, that those kind of genderized spheres of inquiry and marketing and presentation are kind of how we unintentionally are initiated. Indigenous cultures made that initiation quite deliberate, right? Because in a sense, they had a lot on the line. You couldn't afford to not have a fully initiated adolescent, because the idea is that there comes a time when sexual maturity is reached and all those new energies are unleashed, that that maturing into what does it mean to be a life giver for a woman, and what does it mean to be a space holder or a protector or a provider as a masculine, to use, again, general terms. What does that look like? How do I live into that? And so, but that was a matter of, survival and not survival for small land-based cultures. So the ways that those explicit things were done. Now, of course, ironically, sadly, tragically, those initiation practices have largely been interfered with by colonization, right? Of course, so the uninitiated, technologically advanced, ways that kind of maybe outstrip, European influence in the world has been that which has kind of undermined those cultural senses. But in some ways, we are being indoctrinated or conditioned into a version of masculinity and femininity. It might not be a very functional one, whether or not we're conscious of it. And the movements inside, let's say, the David Data movement or the John Wineland movement, in terms of men's work, or the Mankind Project, or the kind of Queen's Code, Alison Armstrong, or Mama Gina School for Womanly Arts, or these things for women, are an attempt to kind of recover a sense of, let's talk about the sacred masculine and the divine feminine aspects of these qualities, and initiate ourselves and each other into a more holistic, aligned, coherent embodiment of these polarities. There are very few places that we can go to experience that second initiation, and I'm hoping that this is a prelude to that conversation, or that experience, or at least an inspiration to it for the people who are listening here. All right, let's see what else we got. Are we at this early stage only trying to identify the strategies, or are we also supposed to start working with them somehow in an attempt to loose them? Great question. So I would, first of all, let's take baby steps. I'm a big fan of baby steps. So part A, if you can identify your strategies, that's great, right? That's a huge step in the right direction. So identify your strategies, sit with that, like let that in, right? Like really, and then ask yourself, what's the cost to me, right? Like what's this like? Now that I know these are strategies for love, just start noticing what the energetics, like what the emotional reality of running those strategies is. And I bet what you're going to find is that there's tension or anxiety involved, right? Whenever we're running a strategy to get love, there's a clench, there's a problem solving, right? So you can, stage one, identify your strategies. Stage two, see if you can feel into the anxiety that running those strategies produces. Stage three, if you want to be brave and take a risk, is pick one of those strategies to go without for a period of time, an hour, an afternoon, a day, a week, right? And see what comes up in you. See if you can create some freedom. Like, wow, I actually don't have to be unconsciously generous just to get love, or unconsciously, provocative or seductive, or unconsciously strong and, powerful. Like, and what comes up in me. And the more I am able to be with what comes up without going back to my strategy, the more space I am getting and loosening them. So there's three stages there. One, what are my strategies? Two, can I feel into the energetic or emotional cost of employing them without changing them? And step three, can I experiment with doing without one of them for a period of time and noticing what comes up and seeing if I can stay inside of my experience and whatever discomfort arises without going back to that strategy. So those are three steps on that journey into loosening the hold of our nervous system and being able to be in our heart more and more and more. Great question. Thank you for that. What else is out there? So I'm just going to run through while I've got you here. Facebook group, please join it if you haven't. There will be a members area where you can access this replay. I'm working on troubleshooting. A few people are having trouble logging in, so I'm going to send out a reminder about that and how to do it. But there's nothing there right now, but once this is up, you'll get an email saying the video is up, and there'll also be a link posted in the Facebook group, so you can access it from either of those places. And again, this is empowering intimacy. So as much as I love and value great information, and I do, here I am giving it, I hope, it doesn't matter too much if you don't try and put it into action in some experiments. So that could be a very small thing, but I invite you all to pick one piece, pick one experiment, at least, and see if you can do one experiment a day, so that this 5 weeks of empowering intimacy becomes something that you've actually now spent, 42 days on. And when you spend 42 days on something, it works. 6 weeks I'm thinking about, because we have that gap. So put it into practice, and in a sense, at least hold out hope or have some faith that very small things can make huge differences. And we're going to continue to build on what we've shared today. And we've shared quite a bit today, but this is going to be something that hopefully becomes part of your path. And this is really where intimacy or relationship as a path opens up in front of us. Okay, deep breath. Thank you very much for being here. Delighted to see so many of you on this call. And next week, same time, check in on the Facebook group. The recording will be up soon. And the last thing I'll say is, if having been on this call, if you know somebody who you think would really get some value from this, and you want to invite them, please do. I'm holding registration open till Monday, so that anybody can easily catch up with the recording. And if that's somebody that you know, or that you have a partner, or if you would like to be able to share this with a friend, because the more this stuff becomes part of our life, the easier it gets for all of us. So I know when I'm doing something new, I get as many people that I know involved with it with me, so that it becomes easier and easier for me to get it. Because the more times I get to have that conversation, because we're sharing language and opening new boxes together, it supports me. It becomes easier for me. So if that's something that occurs to you, please let that person know, and they can either sign up on the link, or you can be in touch with me directly. All right, everybody. I'll see you next week for module 2 and that reel of communion, which is going to be a really big needle mover, right? That the reality of how we actually communicate to create that open-hearted, sustainable intimacy. So it's a big deal, and I can't wait to see you guys there and be involved in the discussions that go on in between now and then. All right, bye for now.